Hello, everyone. So today we have a pretty important topic, a lot of energy in this one. I don't usually go political, and this is kind of a new thing for me, but I feel as though it's really important, especially because of the recent shootings and or terrorist attacks, things like that. There's a lot of people talking a lot of nonsense out there. There are a lot of agendas being pushed, specifically anti-gun, anti-assault weapon, whatever you want to call it. All sorts of debating about the Constitution. There's all sorts of things. What I want to explain, go into deep detail today, is the white male diversion agenda. So the white male the privileged white male diversion or distraction from what's really going on. And the reason why I called it that is because it is a diverting agenda. So it's telling you that white men are the ones in power and diverting your attention away from what is really happening and what is really going on. And this goes into a lot of different things. But first, it's going to be basically what I call the blame game, which is it's easier to point fingers and to blame other people than it is to, if you hear my dog over there, that he's just hanging out and he'll probably whine at me a little bit, but it's easier to point fingers than it is to solve inner truths and trials and tribulations. So it's easier to say, oh, you know what? I don't have what I want because there's a bunch of white people who are at the seat of power in the world and they take all of the energy and money away from me. And it's really easy to point fingers. However, it is not easy to go within, to really access empowerment and access getting to a place of self-power, getting to a place of self-sufficiency. And that's a huge point I want to make right off the bat, is that me and this channel and this podcast represent self-empowerment. It doesn't mean that other people aren't involved, because community and tribe is really important. But we're about self-empowerment. We're about self-sufficiency. We're about taking care of yourself before you can be of service, before you can really give your all and be your best and succeed in the world. You have to understand yourself. You have to be connected to yourself first and foremost, as I go into the primal position, having yourself as being primary, the primary experiential point to which all things stem from, because that's your experience. So what this goes into is white male scapegoat distractions. So white men are used as a distraction for there are a lot of things, racism, sexism, all sorts of things, misogyny. Now, I'm not saying none of those exist. But they're used as a scapegoat so that people don't actually need to try very hard to be successful. So there can be equal opportunity for people, whatever the fuck that means. So white male scapegoat distraction. Again, it's another distraction technique, because the whole white male, bullshit like men make more than women. They have their wages are different, and they don't make the distinction between wages and earnings. And men usually have certain higher paying jobs that women don't normally have. There are reasons that men on average, which is again just such a obfuscated, confusing number to deal with because it doesn't specify a profession, or it's just leaving out too many factors. So basically, it's just saying men make more than women. Okay, what about this guy who's a mechanical engineer or something, and this lady who's a janitor? It's like, really, you're comparing those two? It's like if you went to like a specific company and showed that this was happening, then it would make sense. Um, so the reason why it's a diversion is because the wage gap between Asian males and white males is larger than the gap between women and men. So are white men now going to start saying that Asian males, which have an advantage in the marketplace, in the business world, are there reasons for that? Yeah, maybe because they sacrifice more fucking things than you do. Maybe they work fucking harder than you do. Maybe they do a lot of things that you don't. And instead of being a little baby victim about it, maybe you could say, okay, what are those reasons and how can I do better at that? What are some things I could sacrifice? Maybe you should like turn off the fucking television. Maybe you should work on yourself and, really dive deep in within and find that the inner flame, the inner energy, instead of just complaining because someone else got your job and they happen to be a man. I mean, what if it's an Asian and he's a man? You're going to move from white men to then Asian men. Oh, men have it, men have it all, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, want you to think that white males and or European people of European descent are to blame for all the world's problems. And this kind of goes into the education system, but it kind of goes into what I call victimhood entrapment or ensnarement. So victimhood is a perspective. It is a mentality. It is not a reality. So if you want to think that you are a victim to life, that you are a victim to even being born into this world, you can create that for yourself. You can create realities where you are imprisoned inside of perspectives, and that's what reality is perspective. And a lot of people don't understand that. So this goes into kind of like the whole thing about white people being this kind of the seat of all evil and not really having any culture or soul, at least white people of America. It's specifically white American people, because our cultures and holidays have kind of been taken from people, which is how all of them are across the globe. China's culture is what it is today because they killed the indigenous and took over. It's called conquest, slavery. All of those things are universal, and I'll go into that in a little bit. But it kind of goes into there are underlying mechanics below the liberal agenda that have kind of ensnared people's hearts to being about empowerment when they're really about enslavement and indoctrination into these imprisonment mentalities that keep you very in like low grade realities where basically you don't get what you want because there are other people who are responsible for this, which is absolute bullshit. Yeah, I want you to think women are victims, oppressed, and helpless to this white male agenda. Now, not saying that there aren't white males in power. I'm not saying that men don't have a predominantly higher Um, maybe they are maybe higher up on the dominance kind of hierarchy. Um, but the thing about this is that there are women inside of this too. They are what I call opportunistic people, advantageous. It has nothing to do with whether or not they're a man or a woman. They are opportunistic and advantageous, which means they'll stab your fucking back at any moment. Like, they are people who get to the top no matter what, no matter if they have to fuck people, no matter if they have to kill people, no matter if they have to steal from, third world countries. Um, these are not their race, their skin color, nothing matters except their mentality, how they perceive reality, what they believe, and what drives them to do what they do, which is basically take advantage of everyone. So, I mean, if we're talking about an oppressive person, that means they have a predatorial mind. They have a predator instinct. They are opportunistic, and I'll go into a little bit when I talk about sheep and sheepdogs and wolves. Okay, there are sharks, literal shark people who are predators. Now, I'm not saying they transform into sharks. What I'm saying is they have the same mind. Okay, so they either see you, okay, as food, or they see you as someone who's gonna, help them get what they want. And this is really important because a lot of people, especially the underlying liberal agenda, um, is telling you that it has something to do with these superficial things. And yes, men have been in a seat of power for a long time. It doesn't have so much to do with that as it has been to, it's probably just a coincidence or consequence of men generally having these higher hormones of these things, of these kind of controlling, dominating kind of frequencies and energies. But basically, it's just that they're opportunistic. Um, they don't care about you, which is something I'll go into in a little bit as well. But it's just because they're opportunistic. This is inoculated in education because in history we're taught, all the Europeans were horrible individuals because of slavery. That's a big one, slavery. Slavery was universal almost. Pretty much every single nation on the planet that exists today exists because of conquest. Okay, because they came into a land, killed all the people or enslaved all the people, indoctrinated them, and that's why China exists. That's why America exists. Hell, there might be even why Africa exists or any of the places exist. It's why they're Mexican people in Mexico. Like, it's because the Spanish came over and killed and raped and colonized all of those countries, all of those nations, those states. Slavery was universal, pretty much. It wasn't entirely, but that's fine. We're not going to be semantical about it because it was so widespread. There was slavery in Africa almost 1,000 years before we ever got there. Before Europeans, we as in Europeans, white people, before white people ever got there. I'm talking pre-colonization. So, yeah, conquest has led to almost every developed nation, and that's pretty normal. But they want you to think it's not, and just unique to white people, and that that's why one of the things is that I'll talk about later, kind of work it in, is you can't be racist to white people, even though we're a race. That's not a thing. Because there's an agenda against white people. And I don't want to say that, but no one talks about the Muslim slave trade, which, by the way, was much more than the American slave trade. And they castrated their slaves. So when I go look up the Muslim slave trade, and you'll be pretty grossed out by that. Again, I'm not trying to, point fingers. This is just like, it's not just Europeans. People are taught a very skewed view of history, and it's like the natives of America took slaves. How do you think the Lakota Nation got so massive? Because they fucking killed people. How do you think the Cherokee got so humongous? Because they fucking killed people. What do you think? If you weren't that savage, your nation didn't survive. Probably one of the only reasons why there's so many, why there are still Native Americans today, is that basically is because we came in, we're like, I don't know about this. Because there were probably hundreds and hundreds of nations, and that's why it's so confusing, is because, I mean, just in America alone, there were hundreds of nations of natives. And it's like now we just call them Native Americans and call them the most oppressed, genocided people of all time. Like, it's ridiculous. There's been genocide across cultures over the whole time span of human history. It's ridiculous. So the thing about it is, when you talk about advantageous or opportunistic people, corporations, it goes up the layers of the pyramid, is intentionality. So I often use the terminology, like imagine a doctor and imagine a thief, someone who's trying to rob you. Okay. Now a doctor cuts you open for surgery, let's say, cuts you open, um, moves things around, sews you back up. Okay. What does a person who's trying to steal your money or something does? He comes up with a knife and stabs you, 5 times and takes your wallet and runs off. They use the same implement. They used a sharp metal object, a knife, or a scalpel, which is the same thing. It's a knife. One is just used for different intention, and that's the point I want to make, is intentionality. So intention is really important, because that's really one of the only things that matters in this particular circumstance. There are 3 kinds of people, and I'll go into that here in a bit. But intentionality is the key, because the doctor's intention is to cut you open, move some stuff around, and allow your body to heal. He has a good intention for you. Whenever the robber does it, even though they're using basically the same tool, he is doing it for harm. That's his intention. And that's what creates the consequence or result, either you healing or you dying or being very badly injured. And this is kind of the mechanics of how you can kind of see where people's intentions are. Do they have good intentions for you? What are their intentions? Because that's the only thing that matters. Because again, the tool is the same. It's the person's intention. But most like media and people like that, they don't want you to know their real intention. Usually they don't let that come out to light, because that kind of destroys their power and control over the narrative or the story of the process, which is basically controlling what you think. So empowerment, guns, being empowerment plus guns, or martial arts, things like that, being able to protect yourself, is the seat of sovereignty and security of rights. So weapons and or protections, not given, but taken by citizens, because it is, it is for the protection of our inalienable rights. People don't understand this. They always talk about hunting and fucking guns during the Civil War and shit, and it's just preposterous. Basically, the only reason why we don't live in communist China, now I'm not saying America doesn't have a ways to go, and there aren't, nasty things like central bankers and things like that here. They control media and all these different factors, but there's a distance. There's a distance between you and the government, which can sometimes be tyrannical. Places like China, they're forced to do things. They don't have a choice. They're forced by the government. They can't post things. I can post whatever the fuck I want in America. They can't post things to certain different websites. A lot of places are like this. Like, they're not allowed the freedoms that we have, because there were at one point people who had guns, who were advantageous and opportunistic and had good intentions. and said, okay, we need these rights to protect, all of the rights. Because if you don't have guns, if you can't protect yourself against advantageous, opportunistic people, then that's what's going to happen. All your rights are going to be taken away from you. And that's what kind of was going on during the Civil War as well. As there's like an underlying government versus people thing. And a lot of people say, "Oh, the government, if they would have, they would have done that a long time ago." No, there'd be a civil war and millions would die, and they're comfy and lazy elites. They don't want to have to deal with bloodshed that's close to their doors. So people think that the government actually cares about them, and that's really wrong. They're opportunistic. They care about you because you want them to, because that's how they get what they want. So this is why it's a problem when you get very, very opportunistic people, very opportunistic corporations that are usually don't have your best intentions in mind. They basically just have the intention of getting more money because that's how the world goes. You get to a point where people mistaken the government and government officials, the people in power, the bankers, everyone, as being, well, looking out for them. Oh, they're proposing these gun control laws, so that must mean that they really care. They're really doing something about it, and that's what they want you to think. But they're not accomplishing anything. What they're really doing is just gathering more power. So they're gathering more and more subtle control until it builds and builds and builds, and then one day we live in communist China for real. I mean, that's how it works, and the founding fathers warned us of this. And of course, there's a whole thing. Oh, the founding fathers had slaves. They were pigs. Usually, that's said by people who aren't that educated. So, um, I'm not saying that they're stupid, but these opportunistic people, um, they are basically trying to weasel their way in because they know if they try and do it forcefully, there's going to be a lot of backlash. So if they can get us to willingly hand over these rights, then no blood lost. Then it's totally cool. Then it'll be in the name of freedom and beliefs and all this, hogwash. Because yeah, I mean, removing assault weapons is gonna solve any problems. I mean, there's the dark web. There's so many things that it just makes more problems. That's kind of usually what happens when you elaborate too much on laws like that. So wolves, sheepdogs, and sheep. Okay, so this isn't complete, but there are about three types of people in the world. There are wolves, these opportunistic people, real perceptive, like reptiles, real perceptive, real analytical, real cold, real collected, really sophisticated. Sheepdogs. Sheepdogs are the people that watch over the sheep, that guide them, just guide normal, everyday people who might not know what's going on, have their own professions, do their own thing. Sheepdogs are kind of the protectors, the watchers, the protectors of the pack. Okay. Now, some sheepdogs may look like sheepdogs, but really aren't. They just work for the wolves. So wolves, just some of them are just trying to survive and just doing their own thing. Most of the ones I'm going to talk about, those advantageous people, they are the ones who will eat you. Like the elites will eat you for dinner, literally. No joke. The people in government don't give a shit about you. They really don't. Some of them might have some good intentions, but the people in actual power positions have no fuck to give to you. They really don't care. And you need to get that in your head. They're opportunistic. They could care less. They would step on you to get an extra dime off the sidewalk. I mean, they'd step right on your face and not care. I'm sure whenever the cameras come out, though, they'd be like, "Oh, I'm going to save your daughter's life," and like, play like they're they're holy and just and pure. And that's why they all try and act pure. And that's why usually they never are, because that's impossible. Um, yeah. So the sheep, just normal everyday people. Um, the sheepdogs are, people that help out, they guide. And the sheepdogs have to kind of get to know what it means to be a wolf, what it means to be this kind of advantageous person. So they kind of walk the line between taking advantage and empowerment. But a real sheepdog is about empowerment, is about turning everyone into a sheepdog. Um, the elites or the people in power positions, the advantageous, opportunistic people, they know how to make people follow them and obey them. They know how to control people. They use symbolism and words of power and fear, which is a huge mechanism inside of the media. Is fear. That's probably the biggest driver, because what we're afraid of is, all of it basically stems back to death. And that's a big part of, death sells. People always say sex sells, but that's old. Death sells. And that's the thing recently, is people dying. And, a big part of me is suspicious as to whether or not these people in power orchestrate those things in some fashion, pay some guy to kill himself and kill a bunch of people. I mean, they have enough money. You never know. But they know how to make people, follow and obey using fear and symbolism and beliefs and words, all sorts of things. There are all these linguistic programs that they use to entrap people and make them think they're working towards some amazing, initiative for greatness. And so this goes into Civil War, the Captain America movie, Civil War, and yeah, that whole Captain America franchise, where we willingly give up freedoms for false security, and we give them up to these opportunistic individuals who don't usually have the best of intentions. And even if they did, you never know. I mean, power does things, especially with money, especially when we're dealing with money. So whenever people put too much power into the hands of the government, things like Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030 come up, which are basically like Hunger Games type agendas. Real agenda, by the way, look it up, where they want to section off all humans into these, like, basically inhabitable zones. And then all wildlife, all areas of interest are sectioned off to where no one can live on them, exactly like in the Hunger Games. And then depopulation measures are put into place. And that's what the Hunger Games is a depopulation mechanism. Every year, people from the zones come in and kill each other to death. And it's like a fun game to all the elites, and they watch it. If we let this follow on the track, Hunger Games is gonna be basically like a "I told you so" to everyone. And if you don't know about these agendas, please go look them up. This is incredibly important stuff, only because these things actually exist, and these people's plans for depopulation, desensitization, evolution, all sorts of things, like basically creating a slave race that just kind of like worker ants, things like that. I know it sounds pretty dark and dystopian, but I don't think there's anything is destined to be. So I don't think it's gonna happen. But the underlying kind of like New World Order, the underlying energy from the liberalism type agenda that's focused on minorities and things like that, is really just an evil agenda that's kind of masquerading as being out for the downtrodden, when really they just take giant shits on the downtrodden, like Hillary Clinton stealing money from Haiti and talking about all the downtrodden and women need to have rights. What about the fucking women in Africa, or the Middle East? I don't know. The Clintons are pretty deep in the Middle East, and they treat their women like shit. Um, so there's Democrats have been this way for quite some time. Things like Planned Parenthood, which I'm not against women having access to different things for their bodies, like that, like birth control and things like that. But a lot of people don't know Margaret Sanger, who started Planned Parenthood. Everyone sees her as like a hero for women, but she was a eugenicist who wanted to depopulate minority communities. This is public. She actually has admitted this publicly. Did, because she lived a long time ago. She started it to depopulate. She was a part of a government plan to depopulate minority communities and destabilize the whole structure of the minority family system, which has happened. The reason why there's so much crime in minority communities and why most of these people are people of color is because of these agendas, these programs that are seemingly on the outside really seem to have wonderful intentions, helping women, giving them rights, giving them all these things that are supposed to help them. Not saying that, Planned Parenthood doesn't do anything well now. I'm saying it started out that way. So, you know, with agendas like this, it kind of exposes what I call Orwellian mechanics. George Orwell wrote a bunch of books, dystopian, weird fantasy things in the future, and a lot of them have come true to a certain extent. But this goes into, Orwellian kind of dystopian mechanics of these things that, there is a force of people that is trying to destabilize and desensitize everyone to truth and to heritage and culture and connecting and empowerment. And that it is a real force and it's still alive today, as of the whole anti-gun movement, everyone rallying up to get on a completely useless bill that isn't going to stop killing. It's not going to stop mass shootings because you can make a bomb at Home Depot that could blow up a city block. I mean, it's never going to stop because whenever people do that, whenever people put their consciousness to it, they give it the fire and the attention that it needs to build and build and become something more. So if we didn't put our attention there, we stood by our beliefs and our rights that protect all the other rights, because guns, people with honor who have guns and ways to protect themselves are the only reason we are not communist China. And there's not literally a government official coming to knock on my door right now, or sorry, knocking down my door to arrest me for having offensive content and or expressing myself freely, which I can do in this country. Unless you're in public, you can't go around cursing and, saying a bunch of horrible things. But I mean, we have like lawyers and a wonderful, not perfect systems. A lot of our systems are corrupted, but that happens when you have power and responsibility and all of the things that come with freedom. You also have people who take advantage of it. So there is a war being waged on men, specifically. Women matter, of course. Every person matters. But there is specifically an agenda against men and white people simultaneously. And I don't mean Europeans. I mean Aryans. I mean people that look like me. People who, fair skinned, usually blonde hair, people who look like me, not traditional people, not people from France, not people from Europe, because, they're pretty far away from American values. They're almost not even really considered that. I wouldn't consider them that way. And this is where the energy kind of goes. It's not talking about traditional Europeans, traditional white people, even though that's supposedly the seed of all the evil. They're talking about white men in America. They're talking about white people here. Everyone else, they're going to come up with different things to kind of make it to where, no, they're not quite white. They're Italian, or they're this. Italians might even be might as well be Mexicans. They'll make up something. But there's a war being waged on men specifically, and white people. The One of the things is the fact that people still say people of color, and this is, a lot of people don't pay attention to this, but it's probably one of the most important things, is that this word was created a long time ago by Democrats, by the way. Democrats were the people who were the KKK and, you know, all of those different things. Not the segregationists, but like the weird, segregationists, forced segregation, all those things, but colored people and white people. So everyone else except white people are called people of color. And if you decode that, okay, color, what is color? Color is life. That's what color is. Color is life. It's vibrance. It's soul. Colorful things are wonderful, but we're white. Even though I'm not white, I'm like, I would say like between peach and cream colored. I'm not the color white, literally. That would be gross. Some people are really pale, but still. But color and white linguistic meaning. So color is beautiful, vibrant, lively, life, soulful. Culture, the symbolism comes in. Culture, colors are really important. White is bland, void, and vapid. Doesn't mean anything. It's just white. It's just a surface to paint all your cool stuff on. So this is what they do. This is what they're pushing towards. That word is literally distinguishing. Whenever you go into it, go down, soul, culture, vibrance, and then it goes into divinity, because soul, it's going to get to a point where white people don't have a soul. That's a huge part of it. And that's why why do you think gingers are said to not have a soul? They're just stereotyped to not have one. Gingers are the original Scandinavians, the original Aryan race, the original one of the original white people. So literally in that context. But yeah, it goes into divinity, because if you don't have a soul, if you're not a part of the color, if you're not a part of the vibrance, then what are you? You don't mean much. You don't deserve much. You're white. You're not colored like us. You're not rich with culture and traditional values like us. You're not rich with heritage. You're just a terrible white person whose heritage goes back to slavery and all the horrible things you're told that you did. And my heritage is most likely because of my last name. It's Hill. So it means man of the hill. Usually those, men of the hill are also farmers. So it's Old English is the word. So, my heritage was probably poor farmers in England. Might not have ever had a slave in my timeline, but I'm clumped in this category with white people and Europeans and all this fucking nonsense. You want to know who had slaves? Everyone who had money, baby. All the fucking wealthy people all across the world had slaves because they're advantageous. That's what they do. They're like, oh, cheap labor, cheap whatever I want. Of course. Because that's what they care about. They care about advancing and taking advantage of other people for what they want. Their gain. The amount of greatness that this world has become, and the amount of horror in this world is because of those people, because of advantageous, opportunistic people. I don't know how the pyramids were made, but the story is told, made by slaves, with a pharaoh or one of his generals whipping them in the back. that's how all these amazing things, because someone's got to build it. I mean, do you think the engineer is going to build the skyscraper? No, he fucking isn't. Um, and that's what it kind of goes into, is that there's this whole demonization of white people, especially white males, which is complete bullshit and a total myth. And it goes into this because there's an agenda, might not be your own, even if you have kind of been indoctrinated into these things. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person or evil like these people are, because you're not pushing the agenda. You're not the one at the back with the whip, whipping everyone and telling them to, go forward for some reason. But it goes into divinity and royalty. So whenever these agendas are completed, if we let them be completed, um, there is going to be a reestablishment of royalty. The elite power structure is going to exclude uh, me. It's going to exclude people who are Aryan specifically, um, because we are supposedly the seat of all evil. So this goes into supremacy movements. Specifically, the New Age feminism is about women supremacy. It's mostly about man hating. Um, at least what you see at least what you see in the mainstream. There are plenty of people out for the real empowerment of women. And if you want to be about women empowerment so much, if you want to debate these tiny statistical fallacies, that's okay. If you want to stay here and talk about the goddamn wage gap, but there are women in Saudi Arabia, in Iran, and Iraq that are getting raped and murdered in public because they cheated on their husband. There are women there. If they don't wear a burqa, there's a chance that they're gonna get their fucking head chopped off in public. And these are real things. You don't have to take my word for it. And you're talking about these little wage gap things when it's not even a wage. They don't even explain to you the difference between a wage and an earning. So basically, they're just swindling you into a victimhood mentality forever. Because once you get a taste of it, once you get a taste of that power that you get whenever you become a victim, you hold almost the most power. I mean, no one can say anything about the Jews anymore because of the Holocaust. They're now the ultimate victim. And I mean, there's so many different victim things like this. And the people who are going to control the world are the people who are going to be the ones that are the most victimized now, when the people who are going to control the world in the future. There's a great quote: you can find the people who control the world if you can find the people you can't criticize. That's a big one. Because that gives you the most power, because then people automatically lose their rights because they can't criticize you, and they can't use critical thinking. They can't use critical thinking to go against you. They can't, because you have more power. You're a victim. So you get all the stuff. White people are void of heritage and culture. At least American. Again, what I'm talking about, American, because we've taken a bunch of cultures and heritages and kind of smushed them all together. And that's really how most of the other ones are. And even they're like so similar. Like there's Gaia in the mythology of Greek mythology, and then there's Pachamama in Central American type cosmologies. And it's like, they're very similar. They're cut from the same cloth, and we like to think they're different and separate, but I mean, they're not really. But white people have kind of, American culture is kind of a hodgepodge, a kind of accumulation of different cultures and holidays and all sorts of things. Thanksgiving, Christmas. Christmas is, a Siberian shamanism thing, and Easter is Ishtar, and Thanksgiving is like a weird supper that was had between, Europeans and natives like a long time ago, where they shared corn and food and stuff. Um, this goes into whenever we talk about the reestablishment of the royalty systems. So reestablish, and then before that happens, there has to be the divine races. And white people are not a part of that. At least American white people, we're not a part of that. And they're gonna say, "Well, you don't have traditions. You know, you took everyone's stuff. You know, you're this, you're that. You're a fucking man. You're white. You know, you look at your skin. You have bland skin. We're all colored and wonderful and beautiful." And this plays into as well the kind of programming that natives were all peaceful and like everyone was peaceful until white people came around. Um, this goes into the destabilization of American rights and value systems. That the real culture that we have here isn't necessarily our holidays and all rituals and all sorts of things. It's our rights because slavery, conquest, all these things have been universal. But what is not universal, what is unique to countries like us, specifically us, is our protection of rights, is our I wouldn't say it, maybe availability of rights, being able to do things like what I'm doing now, being able to have your own property, being able be just having the rights that we have. And of course, they can be made better, and America can be made better. But it's the destabilization of our values because what the values do is they allow me to have control for the most part, except for like taxes, over how my life is going to go, how my finances are going to go, where my money is going to go, where all these things are going to go. And what that does is it creates an ultimate responsibility and it creates a process, a natural kind of process of everyone harmonizing together eventually, after a bunch of chaos happens because of power and corruption and all these things. But the only way for us to harmonize with technology, harmonize with the earth, harmonize with everyone, and really get down to the root of everything is for there to be these rights to own guns, weapons, drugs, all sorts of things, because it has to be that way. Because it may seem like order is the right thing, but for the most part, it's not. Because there is a natural process, a kind of collective understanding and learning that's going on. It's like if a kid is trying to learn how to use something and you take it away and tell him he can only use it when you tell him exactly how to do it. There's no or take it away and say he can't use it. That, no, you can't handle that. Can't fucking handle that. You can't do it. So it creates a imbalanced system where the government is like an over nurturing parent that won't shut the fuck up. Oh yeah, this goes into whenever this royalty gets started, we're white people, white Americans are going to be the first to go. So when all these weird Hunger Games agendas, if they ever happen, and this is all speculation, by the way, about what I'm going to say is the elimination of the white American race, either eliminated or turned into slaves. And that's why you kind of see in the Hunger Games, most of the people were kind of white. Most of them. Most of them were white. Most of them were kind of poor, kind of farmers type people. That happens a lot. And that's going to be the main thing is it's kind of the elimination, the depopulation of what is a non-sacred race, even though we have a lot of heritage, we are a race. We should be respected just as any others should. And we also, people can be racist, sexist, misogynist, all sorts of things to white people. You can be sexist to men. You can be racist to white people. I don't see what the difference is. Whenever you do that, you create a demonization of a person. Whenever, because white people have done so much stuff. Yeah, fucking right. Every nation has done stuff. That's the thing. Every nation has conquested and been brutal and done all of the things that we have done. Maybe even worse, some of them. I mean, slavery wasn't abolished in Saudi Arabia till 1962, motherfuckers. Like, white people abolished slavery, the British, and then us. Like, the fuck? We have a wonderful heritage, our rights, just everything that we have, the Constitution, all of that stuff is just brilliant. It's wonderful. However, I mean, there's an underlying crappy stuff that comes along with it. But listen, when you're up against a bunch of savage motherfuckers, you have to be savage too in order to get shit done. Like, in order for America, everyone says it was built by slaves. Of course it was. Yeah, that's good. There are things that people have to do that a lot of the people now aren't advantageous enough, and we wouldn't have rights today if that were true. America would be communist China. If people weren't as advantageous and opportunistic as Thomas Jefferson or any of those guys that preach real freedom and real sovereignty, we wouldn't have America today. We would be in a royalty system. We would be in a dictatorship. We would be in some kind of weird communist country. We would not exist in the way that we do. Thankfully, there are advantageous people who had good intentions, and they happen to be white. So that's great. Do we get very much kudos for that? No, we don't. It's like people think that we're the progenitors of slavery, even though slavery existed more than almost 1,000 years before we ever got to fucking Africa. And guess who sold the Africans to the Europeans, to the Muslims, to the fucking people in Asia, like all the wealthy people across the world? Who do you think sold them? The royalty in Africa. Where do you think they came from? The opportunistic people. It's not the race. That doesn't matter. They're just being advantageous, and they have not so great intentions for people. The intention is the thing. The intention is what is supposed to be concentrated on. So if the intention is towards greater good, greater amount to something better that's going to outweigh all of the shit that's happened, which is what we're trying to push for. What I'm trying to push for is pushing through all this crap. I'm not saying slavery is okay and slavery is validated. I'm saying that there's intention and there's a difference. And people who are, people it's like, okay, so in Egypt, the pharaohs, generals whipping them, using slaves to make the pyramids. Was that validated? What reasons were they making the pyramids? It's very complex. It's not simple. It's not white people did this, black people do this, blah, blah, blah. Those are just confusing statistics that are so general it doesn't mean anything. So so we come into the matriarchy, which is there are a bunch of women supremacists out there who hate men and basically think that men are the seed of all evil and that we don't need them, except for procreation. They made a thing, a joke. I love Wonder Woman, the movie, but they made a joke about it in the movie. She was like, yeah, I figured out that, men are only needed that women can be pleasured well without men, and that, men are only needed for procreation. It was like a little jab. It was like, go fuck yourself. Like, are you for real? Like, that's just so gross. It's like, it would be like the same if we were like, oh, women are only good in the kitchen. Like, what the fuck? No, that's fucking terrible. Like, why would you talk to someone like that? It's like, men are human beings. So are women. Yeah, we go into the matriarchy, female supremacy. Yeah, so that's a big one because people like Hillary Clinton, all the men haters, they like to pull up just stupid shit. Maybe Trump having sex with someone, or anytime the limelight gets on someone, everyone's dirt gets pulled up on them, and then usually it's made up. I don't even know if any of it's true. That's the thing. You're going off people's word. But this is kind of what it goes into. So there'll be, again, this is just speculation, but goes into these people's agendas about creating a matriarchy, basically just lesbians who use men as basically just sperm banks, and they just use them as slaves. I mean, that's what some women actually want. There are, some new age feminists who think men are only really good for procreation and they're fucking useless for everything else. They're just me. I'm not saying all women think that way, but there are some who really despise men in some shape or form. Maybe it was a trauma or something like that. Yeah. So one of the things is reparations. Um, yeah, that's kind of a hard one to grasp. Um, but yeah, people think that white people need to uh, pay back black people, even though there's not really distinct heritage put into that aspect. Because again, Africa is the largest habitable land mass on the planet. So that's really confusing. Um, Immediately, if you use critical thinking, you go, okay, how many countries are in Africa? How many people who live here now who are black have their ancestry that goes back to slavery and then goes back to Africa? How many of those? What about people who moved here from Africa whose families have been there for generations? What about them? Are they going to get paid back too? Like what? They're it's just so stupid. It's because people want to be a part of something. So people want to be a part of it. People want to be the victim because it's easier. It's a lot easier to do that than to be like, you know what? My life is my own fault. And what I do with my life is my responsibility. And whatever I get, whatever, give as much as I can and, just have faith that I'm going to have a good life or, I'm going to live another day. Like you're to blame. And I, made a little post about this. You're to blame for the life you live and the life you don't. And a lot of people would like to think that you are a victim and that you you do have people to blame for what you're given or what you came into, and that you shouldn't own it and be like, yeah, I came from a really crappy place. I came from a really downtrodden place in my life, in my area, but I'm going to make better of it. I'm going to create a fulfilled life. They don't want you to do that. They want you to be a victim and be a pawn in their chess game to get more power, to get more overarching control over people's minds and what they think and what they do and what they wear and what they put in their bodies and what they put on their bodies. The symbolism, the culture, all these different things. They basically just want to create a perfect control system for all of that. And we give up all of our rights against that kind of force willingly. Again. So, yeah. So we go into the New World Order, which is a real term. Look it up. New World Order, veganism is another thing. So nothing wrong with veganism. I honestly, could care less what you eat. The thing is, you should eat vegan because it's healthier for you. Whether or not that's true, I'm not completely sure. Definitely read a bunch of stuff about it and, opposing sides. But you should eat vegan is a thing. Um, you should eat vegan because it's healthier for you, and it really has nothing. And they talk about how it has environmental impacts, things like that, and it's really just a front for global warming stuff, because veganism has been around forever. And it's only just becoming a huge mainstream thing now because it fits into the narrative. So veganism has, I don't know, God, vegetarianism, veganism, been around for ages. I mean, that's the thing, they have all their ads about milk and how it's gross. Yeah, veganism has its weird points. So nature doesn't abide by the same rules that vegans do. Veganism is just a front for basically pushing global warming agendas. Um, and they're kind of allowing certain people to make stand in that arena, even though the real importance is getting out of a monocultural system and into an harmonizing ecological consciousness type of cultural value system. It's all about the culture. And they want you to watch 8 hours of TV a day and at the same time make health conscious choices about the planet. And they want you to think that the culture we live in now, it's possible to heal the planet and heal our bodies. And it doesn't fit because it's not fucking possible. They Veganism is kind of a fluffy way to push their global warming agenda. Veganism is wonderful. Anything that, and I'm not saying veganism is inherently, because a lot of vegans don't really eat well, and they don't take into account certain plants' defense mechanisms. Um, Hence why there are things like sprouted grains, because there are all sorts of things like lectins and anti-nutrients, and they don't take that into account. They just tell you to eat the rainbow of fruits and vegetables, and your general biomarkers will return back to normal. And it's gross. There are certain parts of veganism that are great. Um, but let's just take veganism as a standpoint. A lot of these people, I'm not speaking for vegans, because I'm not one, but a lot of these people, like the cowspiracy people, use points that are invalid. They're mute. Like, what other animal on the planet drinks another animal's breast milk? And it's just like nature doesn't abide by your same rules. Nature is just as much a freak as we are. We're pretty fucking freaky. We drink all different kinds of animal breast milk. We soak, like vegans soak beans in water and sprout them and then eat them. Like, we're weird. And you go into that and it's like, okay, what other species has an intermediary species that facilitates the sexual intercourse, which is what bees are? You go, okay, so what other species has another species take its jizz and put it into a vagina? Like, nature is fucking weird, everyone. Like, get on the boat. Like, bees are literally transporters for uh for sex. It's like, and that's just one part of nature that's really weird. It's like, okay, so you don't think we should eat animals? Well, when you eat a piece of fruit, you're eating a plant's ovary. You're eating its sexual organ. It'd be like it'd be like someone coming and chopping your dick off, like if your dick grew back. But I mean, it'd be like someone coming by and chopping your sexual organs off and eating them. Nature is weird. Plants literally just wave around their sexual organs and we come and eat them and they sustain us. I mean, nature doesn't abide by the same rules. Nature adapts. Nature does whatever it can to survive in the same way that we do. We just have hands and can create things and make things, you know, on the same vein as nature. We create things in, the vision and the energy of nature. We are the creators. So that's why we create things. I mean, bees make giant spit plant sexual, like gather all the pollens, which is, by the way, the secretion of their sexual hormone, which would be like if some animal came by and got my sexual organ, excrement, and gathered it in a giant thing and then hooked it up to something and kept it and then walked around and like took it to all different kinds of women. It's like, what? Plants are so fucking weird. And by the way, plants eat animals. Plants eat anything because that's what, whenever something dies, it falls on the ground. Decomposition is digestion. It's the earth's way of digesting. So whenever you decay, that's you being digested by the ground, by the plants. And then your chemicals and your energy go into the plant, and plants eat plants too. They eat their own fucking kind. My God. Nature does not care about you like you care about it. People I'm not saying that nature isn't some kind of singular consciousness, and it could be. It could care a lot about us, maybe. I don't know. But it definitely, from like an observational standpoint, it doesn't really seem to abide by the same rules that vegans do. If there's any kind of animal, they're like, hell yeah, I'll drink that breast milk. I need to live another day. Like, fuck that. So whenever you get down to it, there are agendas that are being pushed that are meant to separate people and not have them see what is the underlying truth of the whole veganism slash, like, we need to get out of meat and dairy industry. And really, it's no, we need to get out of monoculturalism, because if you plant plants in the same way that you plant cattle, that we do that now with CAFOs and things like that. If we do the same thing with plants, it's just going to kill the ecosystem too. It's still going to do the same thing, because that's what monoculturalism is. It is detrimental to the environment. Everyone knows that already. It's not a good, sustainable way to do it. And again, this is a natural process of us coming to these things. And if we allow these kinds of opportunistic people to take control, then we can't naturally progress, and we can't have the eventuality of everyone having sustainable farming and access to permaculture and wonderful things like that. If we get the government involved, then none of that shit is ever going to happen. And it's just going to be corporations ruling the world. So that is veganism for you. And then there's feminism, the whole global warming thing, which is just, again, that's a front. Yeah, maybe the planet is warming up. It's not the fucking point. Okay. It's not the point at all. The point is culture. The point is giving room for a natural process to happen where we can have sustainable practices emphasized and capitalized on and given profit to and given energy to, not forced government regulations like building a global centralized banking system that taxes everyone who uses carbon, and forcing everyone to not use carbon. Yeah, that sounds sustainable too, you fuckhead. So it's the New World Order. This is the order it goes in. New World Order, vegan, feminism, global warming, anti-man, anti-male, anti-masculine, which again, those are just stereotypes. The qualities that make masculine sometimes are portrayed by women, sometimes portrayed by men, sometimes men portray feminine qualities. Archetype is unstable. Okay, so again, gun rights, white people, anti-white people, anti-gun rights, anti-gun, which is basically like they don't want you to be able to protect yourself and your family. And that's what people kind of get confused, is the Second Amendment is to protect us from a government that has accumulated too much control, because the Civil War happened. So they're not about to launch another war on the citizens to take all the guns, because that would end pretty poorly. Even if it succeeded, there wouldn't be much of them left. There are a lot of veterans in this country, and they would not stand for that. At least most of them wouldn't. So what is going to happen is that, so it's, anti-gun, all those things. And this is where the whole, along with feminism comes the whole gender thing that's really weird and is also another distraction. technique. It is another thing that doesn't really make much sense. So, with gender, okay, there's a difference. Gender is a social construct, okay? Biology is what you got in your pants. Um, those are two different things. You can pretend to be a girl all you want, but that doesn't make you one biologically. Two different things. Very different. Um, and a lot of people are saying they're like asexual and like pansexual and like neutral, like whatever the fuck that means, like void, like you're just a blank canvas. Um, I mean, there are just so many identifications that it goes into this whole victimhood. They want to be a part of a little minority group. And that's most of it. Most of them have good intentions and they're like, I really feel this way. I really feel very feminine. And that's what they identify with. I don't care about that. Still doesn't make them a woman. Even if you get a sex change, it doesn't make you a woman. I mean, it should be disrespectful to women that men are allowed to do that and say that they're a woman and shouldn't have a new name that's given to them, because women biologically have to go through a lot of shit in their life, specifically biologically, have kids, menstrual cycles, all sorts of things that men don't have. And then these men who just feel like women get to just change their body and be called women and be respected as women. That's fucking bullshit. They get to compete in competitions like women. Fucking no, dude. Sorry. Absolutely not. That does not play that doesn't play out in my experience. That is total bullshit and manipulation. Yeah, they're like fucking massive testosterone ridden dudes who have a sex change and go on to like wrestling teams and like, weightlifting teams. And then they win, of course, because men generally almost entirely produce more testosterone, which is the muscle building, bone building, uh, you know, strength building hormone. Not saying women are not as strong, but that's why they're separate um, competitive groups, because men generally are. That's why there are two different ones, and that's why men generally the maxes are higher than the women. And and things like weightlifting, things like that actually have you provide that kind of strength and things like that. But no, men should not get a pass who get a sex change. That's fucking dumb. They should be called something new. And just in my opinion, again. So this goes into, after we get past all that anti-male, anti-white people bullcrap, we get to real empowerment and real freedom, which is having access to all of these things that may be dangerous, that may be, different tools and different things that, may be used to hurt people or may be used for certain things. But the intention is really where it matters when people use things or have things or all sorts of stuff. So empowerment and freedom, empowerment, self-power, all of those things. When we get down to what real empowerment is and real freedom is having that power for us, for individuals, not of the government. So they're against people having guns, but they're okay with police having guns. They're okay with SWAT having assault weapons, but not individuals. They're not for programs at schools or programs, universities, programs in workplaces, they're not for programs all over the place to get people very skilled at using weapons, at defending themselves, at doing all those things, which is what we should support if we want there to be less gun violence and less violence in general, is people who are generally prepared more for things like that. instead of just outlawing the thing, which doesn't remove it from the public. Hence why there are gangs, hence why you can buy freaking rocket launchers on the dark web. Like, still have access to it. It's not going to go away. As long as we have freedom, it's not going to go away. So basically, they're only taking them away from people who actually got a license and paid for them. And that's kind of the part that's really bad because, most of those people paid for them with good intention to protect themselves, to protect other people, and also to have fun, blow shit up. It's real cool. And this kind of is where it goes into turning sheep into sheepdogs. So turning just normal everyday people like me, because I don't have this training I'm talking about. I want to have it. Turning sheeps into sheepdogs. Same thing. So where I kind of got that terminology from is a documentary called Sheepdog Response. And he goes into preparing people and getting them skilled, getting them into that opportunistic mindset and getting them to have good intention, for their power, for their responsibility, for all these different things. And so what we want is we want people who are very, very prepared and very, very skilled at the things that they need to be for life and for everything, for love, for all sorts of things. We need them skilled at it. We need them knowledgeable, educated. What we don't need is people telling us not to do things because that never works. Never has, never will. Did it. So this is where, whenever we turn everyone into badasses, of course, willingly. I'm not saying people should be forced to do this. So once we turn everyone into sheepdogs, then what is going to happen is that we have the baseline covered. So we have the baseline figured out. We have our bases covered. That's what it means. So whenever situations arise, we have the minimum requirements or maximum. We have the maximum requirements for what it is that needs to happen, needs to be facilitated. We can work more as a team, work more as not necessarily like an indoctrinated army, but as a force, a communal force, as a skilled force of individuals who can protect themselves, who can protect other people. And then whenever that happens, you create real freedom because people can do what they want. And at the same time, the most possible people are prepared for the most possible situations that they can be. And that's really all we can do in this life is prepare ourselves for things. So we can only prepare ourselves, for death. We can only prepare ourselves for an exam, for any of these things. We can't start outlawing these challenges, these tests, because collectively, communally, we will not progress as a species if we are not given these responsibilities, ultimate responsibilities, to where it's like, yeah, this gun is yours. You're going to carry it around, concealed or open, whatever. I mean, they can use it on anyone at any instant. And that's that kind of supreme kind of power. And that's the thing is that we need people with good intentions to have those things because the people with bad intentions already have them and they're not going anywhere. The people with bad intentions always find a way to take advantage. They always figure out a way around the rules. So, I'm not saying for all rules, but like fuck the rules for some of these things. Okay. So we need to support people becoming more prepared. You need to support things like the sheepdog response, which is like special ops training, and like profiling training and like all sorts of other things, combat training, all sorts of different things that would help people be more prepared, life or death situations, which is what we're dealing with. There's a lot of death on the news, and people are icky about it because they're comfortable. And we live in a very comfortable society. So people think that they can just build these ideas that don't hold water and just propagate them all over the fucking world. And it doesn't work that way. So, one of the biggest things is basically what I think is we are going to create, at least some of us, the people who actually want to be about empowerment are going to try and create a utopia of this sort, the opposite of the weird dystopian world um, that the elites want for everyone. Agenda 21, Agenda 2030. What we want is to create a utopia, the opposite. So, of freedom fighters. So people who actually want to instill and facilitate change within the culture, the collective behaviors of the society, and actually change real change and create, and not laws and legislations, which sometimes can help, but want to create change for the betterment of the species. And that is a conclusion to my, I guess, my entire talk. But that a lot of people talk about the war on women or the war on Black people, or, the war on this, the war on that. And what there is now is a specific agenda against white men. Right now, it's kind of under the guise of conservatives, because it's like, all conservatives are racist, bigoted, think women should be in the kitchen and Black people should still be slaves. Like that's a part of that agenda too, is pushing that narrative that conservatives are pieces of shit, and which is absolutely wrong. There are definitely pieces of shit out there. But yeah, so yeah, this is kind of that kind of concludes my talk. But thank you for tuning in. If you liked what you saw, please subscribe. And I'll have more videos to come. Thank you.